Mayang gabi sa tanan. Actually, it's buntag here in sunny Florida. I wish I was there in person to greet you, but of course, under the circumstances with the coronavirus, it's not quite possible. But I'm thankful to have this opportunity to greet you as we celebrate 25 years of ministry in the Philippines with Calvary Chapel Bible College in the Philippines. It's amazing to me, especially when I think about how it all started. I want to share some things with you, just some stories and so forth, and I want to share an exhortation with you as well, those of you who are alumni, staff, and those of you who are students this coming year. And it's been an amazing time. A very brief introduction would be that my family and I, came over in June of 1990 to do IBS workshops, and that's where Pastor Jing and I met. He was my assistant and really my most helpful fellow minister along the way. And actually at one point I realized instead of me teaching and Pastor Jing interpreting, I just began to hand things more over to him to be able to teach those workshops. But we also started Rainbow Village Ministries. Actually started as Rainbow Orphanage. Susan and I started that in 1990-91. And so those two ministries were what we did for the 15 years that we lived there in Dumaguete City. And we look back on that time. It's a precious time to us. We just have such fond memories of the people that we came to know and that we worked alongside of. Just the many experiences, not all of them good or easy, but just all in all, the many different experiences that we had was just special. And so we're thankful for that. And I'm just thankful for having the opportunity to share with you. So we were over there and we worked for a few years, and I stepped away from doing the IBS workshops for a while to focus on helping Rainbow get more organized. But we needed to take a family furlough in 1994. And so while we were back there, Pastor John Michaels asked if I would start the Bible College. And at first I was reticent to do it. I just thought of all the different things that needed to be done, and I wasn't sure if I was the one. But I'd had a sense of vision of wanting to train national pastors and leaders. And so God began to give me a piece about doing this. And so we came back from our furlough in the June of 95, I believe it was. And we began to put things in place, and it was a very, very quick start. We had to set everything up, get students. We had to write the curriculum, and in fact I would be writing the curriculum as we went, and I could hardly keep up. Night and day I'd be working on it, and many times I would finish what I was going to teach on the very day, very morning that I was going to teach it. I would finish it and then just walk out to the classroom. And we started out at the Circular House, which I believe is a call center now near the intersection, the crossing of the National Highway and where St. Paul's is. And we started there with 5 students, Pastor Romy, Pastor Reggie, Edwin, Baby Hambora, and I believe it was Freddie. I'm sorry if I can't remember, but it's been a little while. And we started off with those 5 students, and I'm thankful for them. They adjusted. It was like I was feeding them with a fire hose of information. We did 1 year of school in 6 months. It was kind of a crazy time. But we did this at the Circular House. We had classes upstairs, and the kitchen and dorms were downstairs for the students. And then we had a garden area and a big lawn, and so there was it was just a great atmosphere, great situation for us to get started. And there was a lot of work to prepare all that. But the staff was great. The students pitched in, and it was a great thing. And just some of the funny things that I remember even from the beginning was everyone had chores. Everyone had responsibilities on top of their studies and on top of outreaches they were required to do, plus our involvement with Calvary Dumageddon. They were required to be involved. I believe it was Sunday morning, Thursday night, and then also a Tuesday evening. I think it was prayer meeting at that time. And so some of the chores, one of the funniest things was that we would be doing things like taking care of the garden or the grounds. And I remember that one of our students, maybe Laura, she sent a gardener in to do her chore, and I had to go out and tell her. I says, no, the idea isn't to get the job done. The idea is for you to serve. And I'm impressed with how she just took that, she accepted it, and she became a great student and a great servant. And I believe she still is serving the Lord in many different ways. But it wasn't all work. It wasn't all studies. We also had time for basketball, and that was always a fun thing to do. We'd have basketball games, just here and there. And then as Pastor Isom came, it was kind of fun because there would be the two Americans, and then we would have the Filipinos, and of course we have different styles and all of that sort of thing. And I'm not a great basketball player, but it was fun, and we had a great time. I just loved my time of interacting with the students, walking around the grounds, and so on. But I want you to understand that it was really a great challenge for me at the beginning, as it was for the students. It was a great challenge for me to teach in English without the benefit of ESL, English as a second language courses, or understanding and being able to speak the dialect very well. And so there were language and culture differences. There was a diversity of students' backgrounds. I'll share a little more about that in a bit. But really the more difficult thing is how to teach a more Western approach to learning to students who weren't used to that. When we did that, it was actually quite difficult, and I understood that. And so the challenge was for me to make things simple without making things shallow. In other words, I didn't want to take away from the depth of the scriptures. I wanted to be able to communicate that clearly. And so I'd have all the students read one verse at a time as we went around the class. I would ask them questions, and at first they weren't used to doing that. And a lot of that's just because of the usual method of learning was to just memorize and then write a paper or do a project, and it didn't really matter how you came up with that. The answer to the question, as long as you got the answer. And many students really didn't know how to respond to the questions I would ask, and oftentimes they were worried about getting the wrong answer. But of course, that wasn't my concern. My concern is I wanted them to participate. I wanted students to participate. And so we had, of course, inductive Bible study. That was the foundation of our courses. We had the study questions, and then I would work from the study questions and add more questions as we went through, and discussion and tests. And then we also had, even the tests were different than what most students were used to. And of course, the famous IBS notebooks and all the work that went into keeping up the IBS notebooks and going around and checking them every week and even during the week, and helping students understand how to do things. And one of the funny things that we as teachers would talk about is just how when we would ask a question and I'd look around and there'd just be these blank looks, or Pastor Jeff or Pastor Isom would look around and see blank looks, and then finally someone would put a hand up and they would say, Jesus, or maybe righteousness. And we laughed out loud at that, because we understood that culturally it wasn't really appropriate to ask questions, and it felt like challenging the teacher. But the truth of the matter is that we wanted students to ask questions. We wanted them to challenge things because we understood that if they challenged things, they would be able to understand things much better. And we saw that take place as just as we moved along, as students adjusted. And of course, there was a tremendous change between the first semester and the next semester, and then even a major change between the first year and the second year students. And then, of course, we brought in, with Pastor Elmer's help, we began to do a dialect. All the teaching was in the dialect, and then we would have ESL to help them move on to the second year. And that was really my heart's desire, was to see all the teaching be in the dialect first, and then those that were ready could move on to English and a little bit more study and perhaps a little deeper study into the books of the Bible. And it was a great time. I mean, the Circular House, we had day and night classes in the beginning, and that was fun. I mean, we got a lot of students from Calvary Chapel Dumaguete, and one of the funnier things too was I would get tired of studying and working in the office, or working with going over administrative things with the students, and so I would take a walk around the grounds, and oftentimes I would find that the girls were there, the female students would be there in the garden doing their work or preparing something, whatever their responsibility was, and they would find a way to talk while they were doing their work. And then I would see the guys, and the guys oftentimes would be standing there, their arms up on their shovel or their rake or whatever, or leaning against a tree or whatever, and they would be talking and even kind of arguing about what was in class. And I would say, guys, you're supposed to be doing your chores. But Pastor, we're discussing things in the class. I says, well, that's good, but you got to keep doing the work. And that became kind of a joke with the students. And ask Pastor Randy, he can tell you he was always a great one for that. And another funny story was when we moved to the new grounds, which are just beautiful. I mean, that was a special time. Incredible amount of work. We did so much work. Pastor Jerry Camacho really helped with a lot of that. Then Pastor Glenn, Pastor Jang, and Oscar. I mean, just so much that went into all of that. The designing and building and the workers that we had doing that. At times it was kind of crazy. And I remember the day that we were moving, Susan and I were on our way to the airport for a furlough. And I remember passing the jeepney, bringing things up from the Circular House up to the new property, and seeing Pastor Jeff sitting on top of the jeepney, waving to him, and he had this kind of expression like, "Are you leaving us?" It just still makes me laugh thinking about it. And he did a great job of getting everything moved, and the staff did, the students, and it was one big celebration. And of course, we had to really continue to develop the grounds there. And I remember planting trees, and at first the students were just digging these really shallow holes. And so I went on and says, okay, because I used to work at a golf course, and so I knew how to do some planting and that type of thing. And we did a lot in another ministry I was involved with years before. So I got a shovel and I began to dig a hole deep and showed them how I wanted them to plant the trees and put the tree in and the spacing and all that. But one of the students from the province, he didn't stay with us that long, but it was kind of funny. He got the shovel, tried to get the shovel away from me to say, no, Pastor, I'll do it. I said, no, you go get your own shovel. And I said, I'm teaching you, I'm showing you I want you to plant the trees. And I think that's one of those things that was difficult for many students to grasp at first. And I know even the staff did at first until they got used to me in particular. And that is, we wanted to serve alongside, and I still believe that that's really, really vital. That those that we're teaching and equipping, they need to be able to serve alongside of us. We're not over them. We're serving alongside, we're working together. And I believe that that's a very, very important part of leadership. It's what I see Jesus doing. It's what I see Apostle Paul doing. And, that's just one of the things that we need to do as leaders. And I really, really loved walking around the grounds and through the admin office when I wasn't teaching. I loved looking out my office, now Pastor Jing's office, and seeing the classrooms, looking out at the grounds, watching the sunset over the mountain behind us, and it just really brings back great memories. And I love to walk around. I love to walk through the admin building and talk with the staff and see how they're doing. And many times we'd have long discussions in the Bible college office area, and it was great. There were great things that took place there. And at times, yes, it was difficult, but it really, I have to say, it's my most favorite time of teaching God's Word. Even though at times it was the hardest, it's the time that's most favorite to me, because in a lot of ways, I learned how to teach much better that way. I had to teach in a simple way, but I also had to learn how to teach across culture and to make things clear in a way that didn't take away from the depth of the truth, but at the same time was simple and clear. And the early students, they remember my little acronyms like think for yourself, or IYOW. I want you to put it in your own words. And that was a hard thing. But I remember seeing the students opening up dictionaries, opening up Bibles, and writing things down and working so hard. Students working into 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock at night, working on their notebooks. And more than a few times, if a class wasn't ready, hadn't done their work, I'd send them back to the dorms or wherever they wanted to go to study. And then when they were ready, they could come and get me, and we would go on with class. I know I was tough a lot of times, but that's okay. Because as I shared with many students, the time you have in school is the easiest time for the rest of your life, because things are clear about what you're going to do. You have food to eat, you have a place to stay, you have people telling you what to do. But when you get out on your own in ministry, people are becoming to you. And all that work you do with the inductive Bible study and the notebooks and the classes and the tests and all that's like a savings account that you're investing in, so that later on you're able to share that with others and draw out, just as Jesus says, the wise man takes out of the treasures of what he has, and he shares it and he teaches it to others. And so that is something that I hope you all keep in mind, is that it is hard work. And like with the American students that would come over, the transfer students, they would complain about, we never had to work this hard. And I expected more of them than I expected of some of the other students. In particular, I remember working with a couple of tribal students that came from tribal areas, and their English wasn't good at all, and even the dialect that they were used to, whether it was Tagalog or Cebuano, whatever it was really difficult. And I remember, I think it was Pastor Jeff and I sitting down and talking to Pastor Julio and explaining to him that the work was just too hard and he would have to go home. And he pleaded with us in tears. I remember we were at the circular house at the time, and he pleaded us with tears and just said, please, just let me continue. And we did, and I'm thankful for that we did. But of course, I expected less of him and later on with Sally Girl than I expected of the American students. Because as Jesus said in Luke, to whom much is given, much is required. And so the scale was a little tougher for the American students, or those who had college education or better education, than for those whose education was a little lower, or their grasp of English or Cebuano was not so good. And I know it was difficult for them, but I'm so blessed. Even though I know Pastor Julio is with the Lord now, that is one of my most favorite stories, and also Sally Girl. I mean, there are so many favorite stories, but those touched my heart so much, and I'm sure Pastor Jeff remembers that as well, and Pastor Isom. Just some of the hard things we went through, helping students through times was so critical. Just mentoring them, discipling them, helping them along the way, just so critical and so precious and so beautiful. I mean, those are special times to me. One of the things I think that I'm most thankful for is for the many students who went out and served alongside other pastors, other alumni who went out and planted churches. When we sent out our missionaries to Thailand, and also to China and Hong Kong, I'm just so blessed to see that happen. It was kind of beyond what anybody even imagined happening or doing, but it was special. And then I remember when the interns would come back and they'd share at the Founders Day and around the fire pit when we had that, or at beach where we would go to the beach for Founders Day celebration. So it was such a blessing to me to hear how God was working in their lives, how he was bringing what they had learned in class and making it come alive and come into more depth and fullness as they were in their internships. And so I'm just so blessed to see that. Just even, one of the remarkable things is that we started out with 5 students, but I remember the year that we had one of our graduating classes early on. I think it was 2000 or 2001. I can't remember. We only had 3 students, and they were 3 female students. And yet what great students they were. Rochelle and MJ we sent out to Thailand. Rochelle came back and she married Marty, and they went out and planted a church in the north, Buffalongo Po, and MJ and Ari got married, and they went back and took a team to Thailand and served there for about 16 years, I believe. And then we also had Dinah, who became such an important part of what we did as a ministry and with CCOF, and I'm blessed to see her and Jenga's out planting a church as well, and Pastor Randy and Manju and so many others. I'm just blessed to see that extending out from the Bible College, extending out from the training center. It just blesses me. I can't even put it into words how much it blesses me. And so more than ever, I believe we need to remain faithful to what God has called us to do, and to be committed to disciple and train others up for ministry. And we need to really consider not just how do we overcome difficulties, but how do we help others do it as well? How can we help each other overcome difficulties and things that are so puzzling many times, But I want to encourage you that we all share in a great heritage as staff, as graduates, and as students of Calvary Chapel Bible College. And as we would say in the book of Hebrews, padayon, padayon, keep on going. Well, actually we say bante ka padayon. I believe that was it. But padayon, pass it on, continue on, and then pass on what God's invested in you. And I want to finish with just a reminder. This is actually something I shared at a Founders Day in 2003. And I want to read to you the scripture in Isaiah 54. You don't need to turn there. I'll just read it to you. Sing, O barren woman, you who never bore a child. Burst into song, shout for joy, you who were never in labor. Because more are the children of the desolate woman than of her who has a husband, says the Lord. Verse 2 says, enlarge the place of your tent. Stretch your tent curtains wide. Do not hold back. Lengthen your cords. Strengthen your stakes. Verse 3, for you will spread out to the right and to the left. Your descendants will dispossess nations and settle in their desolate cities. That's in Isaiah chapter 54, verses 1 through 3. I want to encourage you. When I read this, I think of the great plans we had back then in 2003 of looking to extend the ministry beyond what we had done, even the site there. We were going to send out a team to Thailand and so many different things that we were planning. I believe in the next year, CCD went out to Uganda, and then from there sent teams into Thailand. I mean, I can't tell you how much it blesses me as a missionary to see that all of you have participated in that in some way or another, extending ministry beyond the site. That, I believe, is part of the responsibility that we all share in the Great Commission. And seeing beyond, that's a word I like to use, is beyond. Seeing beyond is what genuine faith does. We don't look at what is. We don't look at what everybody else sees. We see beyond. We see what could be when the Lord gives us vision to see it. And so just real quickly, going through this text, it says, enlarge the place of your tent. Don't limit what God will do by what you have now or what you see now, whether your own area of ministry work or whether you haven't even started yet. Don't limit God by what is now. Look beyond all of that. The second thing, it says, enlarge the place of your tent. Stretch your tent curtains wide. Don't hold back. And that's the exhortation. Don't you be limited by what already is going on. See beyond your own limitations. Don't say, well, we can't do that. Isn't that what the disciples did with Jesus? They says, well, Lord, we got to send the people away. I mean, look, there's like 5,000 people here. We can never feed them all. And Jesus says, go see what you've got. And they went and they said, well, all I've got, this little boy here has got 5 loaves and 2 fish. But what's that? I mean, we'd have to spend a year's worth of wages to have enough food. And Jesus says, bring it here. And he blessed it, he broke it, and he began to distribute it through the disciples to the people sitting on grass in groups of 50 and 100 and so on. And they ended up having 12 basketful of fragments left over of bread and fish. Imagine that. They ended up with more than they started. And they fed all the people. That's God's economy. So don't limit God by what you see or have now, and don't you be limited by what's already going on. See beyond your own limitations. I mean, I never graduated from college. I didn't graduate from Bible college. And so it amazes me that God used me and simple and foolish to start a Bible college that's going on, and it's been going on for 25 years. A third thing is it says to lengthen your cords and strengthen your stakes. Look and move beyond, but while making sure you have a firm foundation. That's really what I see is make sure things have a firm foundation before you move on. Perhaps it's your own area of ministry, your home church, whatever. You need to have a firm foundation or base to work from. Then it goes on and says, spread out to the right and to the left. And so I want to encourage you to look for and see the opportunities to step up by faith and move forward by faith and be willing to move on if needed and led by God's Spirit. Many times people say, well, why did you leave? Because God had called us to take care of my dad and then my mom, and now we're taking care of Susan's mom. Believe me, we really didn't want to leave, but the Lord had made it clear to us that we had this responsibility, and so we came back. And here's the next part of it is when it talks about your descendants will dispossess nations. I really see that as part of the Great Commission of going out from Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, into the uttermost parts of the world. And when I think of descendants, I think of discipleship. And I want to encourage you to make discipleship a priority and look for and develop and equip new leaders. Don't assume that you've got to carry everything. That's a foolish thing to do. It's foolish. And that's what Jethro told Moses. He says, you're going to wear yourself out. Choose 70 men who can help you make the smaller decisions. And that's called delegation. And that is a responsibility every leader has. We need to look for people who to raise up. We need to develop them. We need to equip them. And then we need to make opportunities and give opportunities for others to serve and to lead alongside us, just as we did at the beginning. And the final thing was to dispossess and settle in their desolate cities. In other words, have vision and faith to see beyond your own land. And you might think, well, that's just impossible. It isn't. Think about Rochelle and MJ, and then the first team that we sent out to Thailand, and then the team that went to Uganda, and then the teams that went to Thailand, and those that went to Hong Kong, and smuggling Bibles and going into China. I mean, God isn't limited, so don't you limit him, and don't you be limited. Look beyond your own land, wherever that might be. If you're in Dumaguete, look beyond Dumaguete. If you're, in some other area, if you're in the mountains, then maybe the Lord's calling you to go to the next mountain, whatever it might be. Even in this time of coronavirus and all the different difficulties, we need to see obstacles as opportunities. The recent interruption of COVID-19, the coronavirus, is just that. It's just an interruption. It's not forever. I don't know what's ahead. I don't know how it's going to be. But God isn't limited by that. The church has survived almost 2,000 years through times of persecution, through pandemics, through different turmoil in governments and nations and the world and disasters and so on. God is great, and we need to trust in him, and we need to see beyond what may seem like obstacles and look for how are they opportunities for us to advance the kingdom of God and advance the ministry as the Lord would lead us. Simply ask the Lord for vision to see beyond whatever limitations you see now. Ask for the Holy Spirit's guidance and provision to step into the vision that God gives you for ministry. And may God bless you. And I look forward to hearing great, great things. And I look forward to once again being able to visit you in person. God bless you. And may God continue to be with you. And remember, Badayam, keep on going. Keep moving forward. Even, as Jing used to tell me, basta kununa, even if it's just little by little, keep moving forward by faith. God bless you.